He's not supposed.
No, wrong one.
I read this piece of work by Jung a long while back. It was a meditation on the injunction to treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated. And what Jung pointed out, which I really liked, was that that wasn't an injunction to be nice to other people. It was an invitation to reciprocity. It was something like this. It's like you should figure out how you would like to be treated, like you were taking care of yourself, not how you would like people to respond to you. It's more important than that. It's like imagine you had a child that you really cared for, and someone said, well, people will treat this child exactly like you want them to, but you have to figure out what that is. And so then you'd have to sit down for like a month and you think, okay, well, how do you want your child to be treated? You don't want everyone just to be nice to him. You want people to challenge him, and you want people to discipline him, and you want people to tell him when he's wrong. It's like you don't just want everyone to be nice. That's pathetic. It's pathetic. There's no challenge in that. There's no challenge in that. Human beings are self-conscious, and we know about our limitations, and we know about our weaknesses, and so we can have contempt for human beings in general, because we're just flawed and breakable and all of that. But we know ourselves better than we do everyone else, and so you have a very acute sense of how you're not up to scratch, and so that leads naturally to a sort of self-contemptuous attitude. People are more likely to give prescription medication to their pets than to take them themselves. Imagine someone that you treat well, that you love, then try to treat yourself that way. You got to detach from yourself this. You got to think, okay, well, I'm a person among other people, and I deserve at least as much respect as a person among other people. I should be trying to help myself across time. Instead of being self-contemptuous and self-destructive, I need to take care of myself as if I'm potentially valuable, and to lay out my life that way. It's hard for people. They don't take care of themselves as well as they should. Take care of your room, take care of your things, like have some respect for yourself as a miraculous being, because that is actually what you are. There's a lot of potential within you. You're necessary more than you think to the unfolding of things. That's the thing about being an individual. It's the thing that Western civilization has always recognized, that as an individual, you have a light that you have to bring into the world. And then if you don't bring it into the world is a dimmer place. And that's a bad thing, because when the world is a dim place, it can get very, very, very dark.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. So we are in Chapter 2 of Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. Hi, Shell. Hello to everybody else watching. And we are on page 53, I believe. At least it's been a week, so I haven't picked up the book between now and then. So I think we're on the section for good and evil. So we'll start there at the bottom of page 53. So when their eyes are opened, Adam and Eve realize more than just their nakedness and their necessity for toil. They also come to know good and evil. The serpent says, referring to the fruit, for God doth know that in the days ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. What could that possibly mean? Hey, Floki, how you doing? Welcome, welcome. So, on page 54, what could be left to explore and relate after the vast ground already covered? Well, simple context indicates that it must have something to do with gardens, snakes, disobedience, fruit, sexuality, and nakedness. It was that last item, nakedness, that finally clued me in. It took years. Dogs are predators, so are cats. They kill things and eat them. It's not pretty, but we'll take them as pets and care for them and give them medication when they're sick regardless. Why? They're predators, but it's just their nature. Hey, Sean, good to see you. They do not bear responsibility for it. They're hungry, not evil. They don't have the presence of mind, the creativity, and above all, the self-consciousness necessary for the inspired cruelty of man. Logic is here. Hey, Logic, good to see you. Oh, I've missed you all. I'm sorry I haven't been up lately, but I've been very busy. So, all right. So, the inspired cruelty of man. Why not? It's simple. Unlike us, predators have no comprehension of their fundamental weakness, their fundamental vulnerability, their own subjugation to pain and death. But we know exactly how and where we can be hurt and why. That is as good as a definition as any of self-conscious. We are aware of our own defenselessness, finitude, and mortality. We feel pain and self-disgust and shame and horror, and we know it. We know what makes us suffer. We know how dread and pain can be inflicted upon us, and that means we know exactly how to inflict it on others. We know how we are naked, and we know that nakedness can be exploited, and that means we know how others are naked and how they can be exploited. We can terrify other people consciously. We can hurt and humiliate them for faults we understand only too well. We can torture them, literally, slowly, artfully, and terribly. That's far more than predation. That's a qualitative shift in understanding. That's a cataclysm as large as the development of self-consciousness itself. That's the entry of the knowledge of good and evil into the world. That's a second, as yet unhealed fracture in the structure of existence. That's the transformation of being itself into a moral endeavor, all attendant on that development of sophisticated self-consciousness. Only man could conceive of the rack, the Iron Maiden, and the thumbscrew. Only man will inflict suffering for the sake of suffering. That is the best definition I have of evil I have been able to formulate. Animals can't manage that, but humans, with their excruciating semi-divine capabilities, most certainly can. And with this realization, we have well-nigh full legitimization of the idea, very unpopular in modern intellectual circles, of original sin. And who would dare to say that there was no element of voluntary choice in our evolutionary, individual, and theological transformation? Our ancestors chose their sexual partners, and they selected for consciousness and self-consciousness and moral knowledge. And who can deny the sense of existential guilt that pervades human existence? And who could avoid noting that without guilt, that sense of inbuilt corruption and capacity for wrongdoing, a man is one step from a psychopath? Human beings have a great capacity for wrongdoing. It's an attribute that is unique in the world of life. We can and do make things worse voluntarily with full knowledge of what we are doing, as well as accidentally and carelessly and in a manner that is willfully blind. Given that terrible capacity, that proclivity for malevolent actions, is it any wonder that we have a hard time taking care of ourselves or others, or even that we doubt the value of the entire human enterprise? And we've suspected ourselves for good reason for a very long time. Thousands of years ago, the ancient Mesopotamians believed, for example, that mankind itself was made from the blood of Kingu, the single most terrible monster that the great goddess of chaos could produce, and in her most vengeful and destructive moments. After drawing conclusions such as that, how could we not question the value of our being and even of being itself? Who then could be faced with illness in himself or another without doubting the moral utility of prescribing a healing medication? That's not what that word is, but I don't know. Macadament? Sorry, I misread that. And no one understands the darkness. And no one understands the darkness of the individual better than the individual himself, who then, when ill, is going to be fully committed to his own care. Perhaps man is something that should never have been. Perhaps the world should even be cleansed of all human presence, so that being and consciousness could return to the innocent brutality of the animal. I believe that the person who claims never to have wished for such a thing has never consulted his memory nor confronted his darkest fantasies. What then is to be done? Hey, Taylor. Hey, Okie Kevin Edwards, also known as Different Gnome. Welcome, everybody. So we've got all sorts of people in the house. And if you didn't catch it before, I've got the invitation link here. Should have posted. I'm going to go ahead and post it again. If anybody wants to come up. So, all right. So now we're on page 56, A Spark of the Divine. In Genesis 1, God creates the world with a divine, truthful word, generating habitable paradisal order from the pre-cosmogenic chaos. He then creates man and woman in his image, imbuing them with the capacity to do the same, to create order from chaos and continue his work. At each stage of creation, including the involvement of the formation of the first couple, God reflects upon what has come to be and pronounces it good with capital G. This juxtaposition of Genesis 1 with Genesis 2 and 3, the latter two chapters outlining the fall of man, describing why our lot is so tragically written and ethically torturous, produces a narrative sequence almost unbearable in its profundity. The moral of Genesis 1 is that being brought into existence through the true speech of God. This is true even of man itself prior to his separation from God. This goodness is terribly disrupted by the events of the fall and of Cain and Abel and the flood and the Tower of Babel. But we retain an intimation of the prelapsarian state. That's the state before the fall. Hey, Sam's in the house. Yay. Welcome, Sam. Glad you're here. So, we remember, so to speak. We remain eternally nostalgic for the innocence of childhood, the divine unconscious being of the animal, and the untouched cathedral-like old-growth forest. We find respite in such things. We worship them, even if we are self-proclaimed atheistic environmentalists of the most anti-human sort. The original state of nature, conceived in this manner, is paradisial, but we are no longer one with God and nature, and there is no simple turning back. The original man and woman, existing in an unbroken unity with their creator, did not appear conscious and certainly not self-conscious. Their eyes were not open, but in their perfection, they were also less, not more, than their full post-fall counterparts. The goodness was something bestowed rather than deserved or earned. They exercised no choice. God knows that's easier, but maybe it's not better than, for example, goodness genuinely earned. Maybe, even in some cosmic sense, assuming that consciousness itself is a phenomenon of cosmic significance, free choice matters. Who can speak with certainty about such things? I am unwilling to take these questions off the table, however, merely because they are difficult. So here's a proposition. Perhaps it is not simply the emergence of self-consciousness and the rise of our moral knowledge of death and the fall that besets us and makes us doubt our own worth. Perhaps it is instead our unwillingness, reflected in Adam's shameful hiding, to walk with God despite our fragility and propensity for evil. Now, that's an interesting point. I was talking about this with my mother and about, our being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, whether that is, symbolic or literal, doesn't really matter. But the idea that, when God went looking for Adam after Adam ate the fruit, Adam ate the fruit, realized his own nakedness, and went into hiding. And God was looking for Adam the next day, going, where are you? Where are you? We used to walk together and talk all the time. And now you're hiding, you're gone. And Adam, says, I realized I was naked. And, that was something that I said to my mother, God's lonely. God misses his creation. And that's kind of a big deal. It's not so much that God sits there above judging us and calling us short on our wrongs and our sins, even though a lot of the time that's the way, faith is taught to us. But I think more so that God misses us, and that if we take the courageous step to try and walk with God anyway, even though we are flawed, even though we are, just contemptible. I mean, we have a true capacity for evil and inflicting suffering and harm on other people. And yet God still wants our company, so who are we to say, oh, I'm not good enough to walk with God. I'm not good enough to pray. I'm not good enough. Of course we're not good enough. We are the creation of God. We are not God himself, but God still wants us. God made us knowing that there was this possibility that we could screw it all up, and we screw it all up a lot. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't want us to walk with him. It's kind of like, the dogs. My dogs can screw things up all the time. I mean, they've scratched my sheets to the point where they've shredded them, and it's like, oh my gosh, dog, you have no idea how expensive and precious those sheets are to me, because with my hypersensitivity, I can only have a certain type of bed sheet. Otherwise they bother me and I can't sleep at night. And the dog has no idea that what he's just destroyed, but I still want my dogs with me. I still love them. I still want to play with them and all that good stuff. It doesn't matter. So, hey, yes, survival, have a safe drive home. I'm glad you're listening. So glad you all are here. Let me look at the chat for a second. Autocorrect. So Samantha P says, I love that line, with the ability to create order from chaos, meaning that the world in its natural state is chaotic and it's only you that creates any real order out of it. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is so true, because, if you just let a yard run wild, what happens to it? It becomes overrun with weeds. It could even, have dry dirt patches in it and all sorts of things. It turns wild. And that sort of wilderness is not necessarily good. If we want any order out of it, if we want it to be a garden, we have to take action on it. And it is really only people that are able to create order, things that work together, as opposed to just this rampant chaos and competition and everything like that can happen if you just let a yard go, for example. So, oh, your working logic, it's okay. He says he's going to miss the live. Catch it on the replay. So, oh my goodness. So I'm going to catch it up. Oh, Kevin's here. I missed Kevin. Oh, okay, Kevin Edwards. Gotcha. So yeah, I'm still stuck on the old name. So sorry about that, Kevin. Um, who's not feeling well? Somebody's not. Oh, Shell's not feeling well. I'm so sorry. So yeah. Survival. Get home safely. That's the big point. So, um, but yeah, we definitely have the capacity for evil, but we also have the capacity for good, and that's something that is redemptive in us. And even though we are these, flawed creatures that don't always make the right choices and things like that, God wants to walk with us, just as I want, to keep my animals around me, whether they throw up on the carpet or whatever it is that they do. They're precious to me. So I think that, we're also precious to God, even though and we know our own flawed nature. The dog does not realize, how flawed they are and how much trouble they are to us. And so it just washes right over them. But as human beings, as conscious human beings, we understand, oh crap, I screwed that up. But we shouldn't let that shame and that guilt keep us from our walk with God. God wants us around. God wants us to talk to him. God wants us to be a part of his creation and a part of creating order. So yeah. And my mom thought that was really nice. It was something that she hadn't considered before. So all right, let's get on with this. We are on page 57. The entire Bible is structured so that everything after the fall, the history of Israel, the prophets, the coming of Christ, is presented as a remedy for that fall, a way out of evil. The beginning of conscious history, the rise of the state of all of its pathologies and pride and rigidity, the emergence of great moral figures who try and set things right, culminating in the Messiah himself. That is all part of humanity's attempt, God willing, to set itself right. Oh, thank you, Taylor. I'm glad you like my hair. I curled it this afternoon. I did big pin curls or rag curls, and I'm very proud of how it turned out. So thank you. Okie Edwards says, I don't know if the big freeze is still the prevailing theory of the end of the universe, but I find it fascinating that it's a big part of entropy, and that the idea that the order that we make adds to that entropy. Well, it's interesting because it's both anti-entropy and it is a part of entropy. The two are, forever entangled. Things fall apart and we fix them. We keep up houses, we keep up gardens and things like that. And that's sort of an anti-entropy. That's an addition of order into the world. But it's also a breaking down. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, that sort of thing. So I think that the current prevailing idea is that it's not the big freeze, but things are kind of in an endless cycle that, death and rebirth are always present, even in the universe. And that I don't know if the big collapse still exists, because the universe is expanding, but it's not expanding as fast as they thought it was. So yeah, science is still trying to figure all of this out. All right. So, and this is an amazing thing. The answer is already implicit in Genesis 1. To embody the image of God, to speak out of chaos the being that is good, but to do so consciously of our own free choice. Back is the way forward, as T.S. Eliot so rightly insisted, but back as awake beings, exercising the proper choice of awake beings instead of back to sleep. And this is the T.S. Eliot poem. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring. We will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown, remembered gauge, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning, at the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree. Not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard, in the stillness between two waves of the sea. Quick now, here, now always. A condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, when the tongues of flames are enfolded into the crowned knot of fire, and the fire of the rose are one. This is Little Gidding, 4 quartets, written in 1943. If we take care of ourselves properly, we would have to respect ourselves, but we don't, because we are, not in the least our own eye, fallen creatures. If we lived in capital T truth, if we spoke the capital T truth, then we could walk with God once again and respect ourselves and others and the world. As I've said, we can still walk with God, even in our fallen state, because God still wants us there. We don't have to be these pure beings in order to walk with God. We can walk with God in our brokenness, and it's still okay. You know, God still wants us as his children. So, then we could walk with God once again and respect ourselves and others and the world. Then we might treat ourselves like people we are cared for. We might strive to set the world straight. We might orient it towards heaven, where we would want people we cared for to dwell instead of hell, where our resentment and hatred would eternally sentence everyone. In the areas where Christianity emerged 2,000 years ago, people were much more barbaric than they are today. Conflict was everywhere. Human sacrifice, including that of children, was a common occurrence even in the technologically sophisticated societies such as ancient Carthage. In Rome, arena sports were competitions to the death, and the spilling of blood was commonplace. The probability that a modern person in a functional democratic country will now kill or be killed is infinitesimally low compared to what it was in previous societies, and still is in the unorganized and archaic and inaccurate parts of the world. Then the primarily moral issue confronting society was control of violence, impulsive selfishness, and the mindless greed and brutality that accompanied it. People with those aggressive tendencies still exist. At least now they know that such behavior is suboptimal and either try to control it or encounter major social obstacles if they don't. But now also another problem has arisen, which was perhaps less common in our harsher past. It is easy to believe that people are arrogant, egotistical, and always looking out for themselves. The cynicism that makes that opinion a universal truism is widespread and fashionable, but such an orientation to the world is not at all characteristic of many people. They have the opposite problem. They shoulder intolerable burdens of self-disgust, self-contempt, shame, and self-consciousness. Thus, instead of narcissistically inflating their own importance, they don't value themselves at all, and they don't take care of themselves with attention and skill. It seems that people often don't really believe that they deserve the best care personally speaking. They are excruciatingly aware of their own faults and inadequacies, real and exaggerated, and ashamed and doubtful of their own value. They believe that other people shouldn't suffer, and they will work diligently and altruistically to help them alleviate it. They extend the same courtesy even to animals they are acquainted with, but not so easily to themselves. It is true that the idea of virtuous self-sacrifice is deeply embedded in Western culture, at least insofar as the West has been influenced by Christianity, which is based on the imitation of someone who performed the ultimate act of self-sacrifice. And any claim that the Golden Rule does not mean sacrifice yourself for others might therefore appear dubious. But Christ's archetypical death exists as an example of how to accept finitude, betrayal, tyranny, and tyranny heroically, how to walk with God despite the tragedy of self-conscious knowledge, and not as a directive to victimize ourselves in the service of others. To sacrifice ourselves to God, to the highest good, if you like, does not mean to suffer silently and willingly when some person or other organization demands more from us consistently than is offered in return. That means we are supporting tyranny and allowing ourselves to be treated like slaves. It is not virtuous to be victimized by a bully, even if that bully is oneself. And that's huge. Even if that bully is oneself. So, gosh, that's a hard one for me. Yeah, and I see that all the time, people sacrificing themselves for their work, people sacrificing themselves for their families, people sacrificing themselves for this, that, or the other. And where do you draw the balance? Because in the Bible it says, if a man asks for your shirt, give him your cloak too. And that's a decision that I've come to make. And while everybody is here, we're going to be moving to Thursday night because I don't want to be in competition with another stream that's going on that has decided to start at 8:45. So, I was told that, the last 15 minutes of my stream should be winding down and just I should have closed out, 15 minutes early, and the last 15 minutes are really just for socializing. But that's not always how my streams go. So instead of competing with that other stream, I'm just going to move to Thursday night and let them have Friday night as all the time in the world that they want. I've been told that Friday night is, prime time. So instead of competing for prime time hours, and because this person, asked for my shirt, I'm going to give them my cloak as well. And is that me sacrificing too much? I don't know. I just know that I don't want to compete. And I never got into this to compete with other people. I just wanted to, present and put some good out in the world and stuff like that. And I don't want people to have to choose between one stream or the other. So we're going to be moving to Thursday night, same time, but Thursday instead of Friday night. And then Saturday we'll do the spirituality stream. But yeah, book club on Thursday night now, guys. So yeah, am I bullying myself? Sometimes I can do that. I can get too down on myself if I make a mistake. I can beat myself over the head and be like, how could you be so awful, and just be really, really mean to myself. And it's hard to rein that in. It's difficult to be self-forgiving. So it's just, none of this stuff is clear cut. Nobody was born with a rule book. Nobody was born with an instruction guide. So, yeah, you're right. Attention is currency, and everything wants it. And to a certain extent, I don't want to play that game. If attention is that valuable for somebody else, then they can have it. I don't want this to be a competition. I just want to spend time with you guys and spend it doing something that we enjoy doing together. Tim has a show every night, and you pulled me from his. Well, that's true. That's true. Even though Tim's stuff is completely different than mine, and Tim also breaks his down into smaller videos throughout the days, and Tim just has so many more viewers than me. It's one of those things where it's like, if you really wanted to spend time with him, you'd spend time with him. So, but last week I lost a big chunk of my audience in those last 15 minutes, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to go through that again. So I'm just going to move to Thursday, and then that way there's no competition between audiences, because I know there's overlap. And I just want everybody to be able to have their time, and to not have this competition. So, but it's I will say it's kind of cool that you'd rather spend your time with me than with Tim. So thank you for that, Okie. I really appreciate that. All right. So I learned 2 very important lessons from Carl Jung, the famous Swiss depth psychologist, about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, or loving your neighbor as yourself. That's why I played the song at the beginning. The first lesson was that neither of these statements has anything to do with being nice. The second was that there are equations rather than injunctions. If I am someone's friend, family member, or lover, then I am morally obligated to bargain as hard on my behalf as they are on theirs. If I fail to do so, I will end up a slave and the other person a tyrant. What good is that? It is much better for any relationship when both partners are strong. Furthermore, there is little difference between standing up and speaking for yourselves when you're being bullied or otherwise tormented and enslaved, and standing up and speaking for someone else. As Jung points out, this means embracing and loving the sinner who is yourself as much as forgiving and aiding someone else who is stumbling and imperfect. Oh gosh, I could be wrong then. Shaman says, going with the flow to Thursday is like being in the art of sailing rather than the art of rowing. Yeah, exactly. I want to go with the flow, and not be working against a current or anything like that. But I mean, Jordan Peterson kind of says something different here. There's little difference between standing up and speaking for yourself when you're being bullied or otherwise tormented and enslaved, and standing up and speaking for someone else. Am I allowing myself to be a victim here? I don't know. I just know that it's, the path of least resistance, and it's not that big of a deal. But it is a big deal to, have half my audience snatched away. I mean, that hit me hard. So, I'd just rather not compete. I don't want to fight. I'm not. So, Listening Mantis says, I don't think so, with a heart. Okay. Okay. And Okie Kevin Edwards says, "Oh, I forgot this part of the book makes me rethink my relationships." Exactly. This is tough stuff. This is tough stuff. So, as God Himself claims, so goes the story. Vengeance is mine; I will repay, saith the Lord. According to this philosophy, you do not simply belong to yourself. You are not simply your own possession to torture and mistreat. This is partly because your being is inexorably tied up with that of others, and your mistreatment of yourself can have catastrophic consequences for others. This is most clearly evident, perhaps, in the aftermath of suicide, when those left behind are often both bereft and traumatized. But metaphorically speaking, there is also this. You have a spark of the divine within you, which belongs not to you, but to God. We are, after all, according to Genesis, made in His image. We have the semi-divine capacity for consciousness. Our consciousness participates in the speaking forth of being with a capital B. We are low resolution, catatonic versions of God. We can make order from chaos and vice versa in our way with words. So we may not exactly be God, but we're not exactly nothing either. Ooh. So, yeah, I love the new name, Listening Mantis. That's awesome. So, in my own periods of darkness in the underworld of the soul, I find myself frequently overcome and amazed by the ability of people to befriend each other, to love their intimate partners and parents and children, and to do what they must do to keep the machinery of the world running. I knew a man injured and disabled by a car accident who was employed by a local utility. For years after the crash, he worked side by side with another man who, for his part, suffered with a degenerative neurological disease. They cooperated while repairing the lines, each making up for the other's inadequacy. This sort of everyday heroism is the rule, I believe, rather than the exception. Most individuals are dealing with one or another more serious health problems while going productively and uncomplainingly about their business. If anyone is fortunate enough to be in a rare period of grace and health personally, then he or she typically has at least one close family member in crisis. Yes, yet people prevail and continue to do difficult and effortful tasks to hold themselves and their families and society together. To me, this is miraculous. So much of that dumbfounded gratitude is the only appropriate response. There are so many ways that things can fall apart, to fail to work altogether, and it is always wounded people who are holding it together. They deserve some genuine and heartfelt admiration for that. It's an ongoing miracle of fortitude and perseverance. Isn't that the truth? Now I know why people read the same Bible passage over and over. Yes, because you read it the first time and you get that, first experience, but then you read it again and you find new wisdom and new meaning in the same words. It's the laying down of layers, the layers of understanding that come through time and time again. And reading things over is, I even took a class on this, that people will read Sherlock Holmes mystery novels, even knowing what the ending is. They already know, they've read it before. They know the ending. It's not a surprise, but you're not reading it for that. You're reading it to see little things that you didn't see before, that maybe, your brain just kind of tuned out for a second, but this time around you hear it and you're like, oh, I forgot that part was in there. So it's very cool. In my clinical practice, I encourage people to credit themselves and those around them for acting productively and with care, as well as for the genuine concern and thoughtfulness they manifest towards others. That's what I think I'm doing. I think I'm trying to be thoughtful. I think I'm trying to just step out of the way and let it not be a battle. You know what I mean? I just want everybody to get along. I want everybody to have their time and to have the fullness of their time, whatever that is. So yeah, yeah, I'm starting to feel better about my decision. So people are so tortured by the limitations and constraints of being that I am so amazed that they ever act properly or look beyond themselves at all. But enough do so that we have central heat and running water and infinite computational power and electricity and enough for everyone to eat, and even the capacity to contemplate the fate of broader society and nature and terrible nature itself. All that complex machinery that protects us from freezing and starving and dying from lack of water tends unceasingly towards malfunction through entropy, and it is only the constant attention of careful people that keeps it working so unbelievably well. Some people degenerate into the hell of resentment and the hatred of being, but most refuse to do so despite their suffering and disappointments and losses and inadequacies and ugliness. And again, that miracle is for those with the eyes to see it. Isn't that awesome? Nana says, I missed something when I had to step away. Are we moving to another night and why? Yes, we're moving to Thursday night at the same time. And the reason being is that I don't want to compete with other streamers. I lost half my audience last week in the last 15 minutes, and that really disturbed me. And I don't want to compete with other people. So we're going to move to Thursday night since Friday night seems to be, prime time hours. So yeah, glad I was able to explain that to you, Nana. So, and that's very true. I mean, you think about going back to the book, the Columbine shooters and other people like that who are like, humanity is terrible and it's a plague on the earth and it should be destroyed. And it's like, yeah, but wait a minute. Look around you. We have clean running water. We have homes in the winters. Even places for people who don't want to work, who are homeless and dealing with grave emotional and mental diseases. We take care of these people. We give them warm food and a bed to sleep in and showers and everything else. And so, how can we really hate humanity that much that we want to see all of it destroyed when we all work so hard to take care of one another, even people we don't necessarily want to spend time with? I don't necessarily want to spend time with the local schizophrenic, but I want to make sure he's got a hot meal in his belly and a warm place to sleep at night. So, Taylor says that's deep. Yeah. And we all do this. We all participate in this sort of, protection of one another and wanting to make life better so that we're not freezing to death in the middle of winter. Sorry for the local train going by, but Listening Mantis says that is deep. Wow. Yeah. And so for anybody says that humanity is a plague that needs to be wiped off of earth, have you known a plague that wants to take care of, and make sure that nobody is suffering? What plague doesn't inflict suffering? And yet humanity, which is this supposed plague, we really do care for the stranger. We really do care for people halfway across the world that we don't even know. We want them to have good, fulfilling lives. He says, this audience problem reminds me of the plot of Divinity Original Sin. In the game of gods, the fight for worshipers because their power comes from it. Yeah. And I don't want to play that game. I don't want to play that game. I just want to spend time with you and you guys not have to make that choice, So I'll move to Thursday night and the big boys can play on Friday night. But Saturday night I'm keeping. We're keeping that for worship. So, but yeah, we care for one another, and that's pretty effing huge, and it makes me love humanity even with all its faults. I mean, we may do crazy things like go to war, but on the same token, we have people that are within that war that bind up wounds, even of enemy combatants, because even in that awful state of trying to kill one another, we also, work on saving one another and reducing suffering, even in that time. So come on up, Free. Come on up. You can do it. You can do it. Come on. Come on. It's okay. Come on up. Okay, she's given up. She's gone over to the couch. All right. Humanity in toto and those who compromise it as identifiable people deserve some sympathy for the appalling burden under which the human individual genuinely staggers. Some sympathy for the subjugation to moral vulnerability, tyranny of the state, and the depravitudes of nature. It is an existential situation that no mere animal encounters or endures, and one of severity such that it would take a God to fully bear it. It is this sympathy that should be the proper medicament for self-consciousness, self-contempt, which has its justifications, but only half the full and proper story. Hatred for self and mankind must be balanced with gratefulness for tradition and the state of astonishment at what normal, everyday people accomplish, to say nothing of the staggering achievements of the truly remarkable. We deserve some respect. You deserve some respect. You are important to other people as much as to yourself. You have some vital role to play in the unfolding destiny of the world. You are, therefore, morally obligated to take care of yourself. You should take care of, help, and be good to yourself the same way you would take care of, help, and be good to someone you loved and valued. You may therefore have to conduct yourself habitually in a manner that allows you some respect for your own being, and fair enough. But every person is deeply flawed. Everyone falls short of the glory of God. If that stark fact meant, however, that we had no responsibility to care for ourselves as much as for others, everyone would be brutally punished all the time. That would not be good. That would make the shortcomings of the world, which can make everyone who thinks honestly question the very propriety of the world, worse in every way. That simply cannot be the path forward. To treat yourself as if you were someone you are responsible for helping is instead to consider what would be truly good for you. This is not what you want. It is also not what would make you happy. Every time you give a child something sweet, you make that child happy. That does not mean that you should do nothing for children except feed them candy. Happy is by no means synonymous with good. You must get children to brush their teeth. They must put on their snowsuits when it is cold outside, even though they might object strenuously. You must help a child become virtuous, responsible, awake being, capable of full reciprocity, able to take care of himself and others, and to thrive while doing so. Why would you think it acceptable to do anything less for yourself? Samantha B says, I'm doing my best trying to check up. If I had to take care of something for like 20, so I make comments that are behind, I'll do my best to like what I'm referencing. I don't get LYK. I don't know that one. Sorry. It's all good because, I read ahead and then, I come back to the comments afterwards. So John Townsend reads an excerpt from An English Traveler Walking Colonial America and how the people fighting to survive nature will still often had strangers visit and were hospitable. Exactly. And this goes back to stories, 2,000 years old. If a stranger appears at your door hungry, you bring them in, you feed them, you give them a warm place to stay for the night because nature is so much nastier, that we have an obligation to take care of one another. And in that, you have to think of yourself as the stranger you need to care for. What would you do if you showed up at your door in the state that you're in? If you were able to step outside of yourself and look at yourself, how would you treat yourself and say, if you want to be good to yourself, you might want to take care of this and take care of this and do it in a loving way. So often we go, oh crap, I should have done this, and we'll beat ourselves up for not taking care of ourselves. When in fact we should be, loving and heartful and go, oh, look, I know this is hard. I know it's hard to go to bed on time, but really you need to get some sleep. So just go and lie down and, close your eyes. And if 30 minutes you're not asleep, maybe get up and get a warm glass of milk and treat ourselves, by stepping outside of ourselves and not seeing it as, this is flawed me that I know is, not up to snuff sort of thing. So Survival says, I'm back. I was signing a S-ton of paperwork with a notary to refinance my house. I'm going to have to rewatch this. No problem, Survival. Just glad you're here. So, Okie says, be right back. My turn to drive home. Oh, you all are so good that you're listening and paying attention, besides all this stuff that you have to do. So I thank you all for being here. It's absolutely fabulous. All right. You need to consider the future and think, what might my life look like if I were caring for myself properly? What career would challenge me and render me productive and helpful so that I could shoulder my share of the load and enjoy the consequences? What should I be doing when I have some freedom to improve my health, expand my knowledge, and strengthen my body? You need to know where you are so that you can start to chart your course. You need to know who you are so that you can understand your armament and bolster yourself in respect to your limitations. You need to know where you're going so that you can limit the extent of chaos in your life, restructure order, and bring the divine force of hope to bear in the world. You must determine where you are going so that you can bargain for yourself, so that you don't end up resentful, vengeful, and cruel. You have to articulate your own principles so that you can defend yourself against others taking inappropriate advantage of you, and so that you are secure and safe while you work and play. You must discipline yourself carefully. You must keep the promises you make to yourself and reward yourself so that you can trust and motivate yourself. Now, this is a big one. Keeping promises to ourselves. I have found that when I break a promise to myself, that is a bigger deal on my self-esteem than you would really imagine. It's like being a child again and having one of my parents break a promise to me. How awful it felt that they said, oh yeah, I promise we'll do this, and then it never happens, and it just breaks your heart. And so I find that if I make a promise to myself, I really need to stick to it, no matter what. I promised myself that I would do this, so I'm going to do it. And when I do it, I feel so good and I feel so righteous. Not that I'm better than other people, but that I've done my moral duty. I've done what's good for me, and I can feel proud of myself for keeping that promise. Oh, this little dog! Come on up. You can come up. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. You can do it. And now she's going back to the couch again. I have no idea what is up with you, little dog. She just wants, I know what she wants. She wants a TREAT. But no, you've got to wait. You've got to wait. We're in the middle of the show. You know that. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Sorry about that. So, but yeah, keeping a promise to myself is, what I feel bad when I break a promise to other people, and I almost feel like it's okay to break a promise to myself because it's just to me, but that's not true. It's even sometimes worse to break a promise to myself than it is someone else. So, it's harder to forgive myself for one. So don't underestimate the power of vision and direction. Oh, wait, I skipped over a part. You must keep the promises you make to yourself and reward yourself. There we go. You need to determine how to act towards yourself so that you are most likely to become and stay a good person. It would be good to make the world a better place. Heaven, after all, will not arrive of its own accord. We will have to work to bring it to about and strengthen ourselves so that we can withstand the deadly angels and flaming sword of judgment that God used to bar the entrance. Don't underestimate the power of vision and direction. These are irresistible forces, able to transform what might appear to be unconquerable obstacles into traversable pathways and expanding opportunities. Strengthen the individual. Start with yourself. Take care with yourself. Define who you are. Redefine your personality. Choose your destination and articulate your being. Capital B, being. As the great 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche so brilliantly noted, he whose life has a why can bear almost any how. And that's something I live by. For the longest time, I felt really useless with my disability and no longer being reliable enough to work. And I felt that, I had no more purpose anymore. I couldn't be a mom, so there was that purpose gone. I couldn't be of use to anyone else through work, so that purpose was gone. So it's like, what I was just breathing other people's air at that point, and dealing with chronic pain on a regular basis and things like that. It was like, why am I suffering? What's the point of all of this? And it was only in discovering that, my suffering could be useful to other people, that I could, turn my terrible experiences into wisdom for other people. I decided that I would try and teach other people how to get through what I was going through. And in that, I started to get sort of a glimmer that, I still had purpose in the world. And that made it easier to withstand everything that I was going through. So Samantha P says, to what plague wants to help their target? We're not a plague, we're a parasite. Ah, that's a good point. Let me bring up the doggy and we'll talk about that. Come here, Free. Come here. Come here. Oh. Well, it's 6:05, so I'm going to give them a treat. And we're going to take a short bathroom break because, oh my goodness, this doggy, she's just going to whine and annoy until she gets something sweet. So I'm going to put the music back on. We're going to replay it, and we're going to take a 3-minute break.
I read this piece of work by Jung a long while back. It was a meditation on the injunction to treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated. And what Jung pointed out, which I really liked, was that wasn't an injunction to be nice to other people. It was an invitation to reciprocity. It was something like this. It's like you should figure out how you would like to be treated, like you were taking care of yourself, not how you would like people to respond to you. It's more important than that. It's like imagine you had a child that you really cared for, and someone said, well, people will treat this child exactly like you want them to, but you have to figure out what that is. And so then you have to sit down for like a month and you think, okay, well, how do you want your child to be treated? You don't want everyone just to be nice to him. You want people to challenge him, and you want people to discipline him, and you want people to tell him when he's wrong. It's like you don't just want everyone to be nice. That's pathetic. It's pathetic. There's no challenge in that. There's no challenge in that. Human beings are self-conscious, and we know about our limitations and we know about our weaknesses, and so we can have contempt for human beings in general because we're just flawed and breakable and all of that. But we know ourselves better than we do everyone else, and so you have a very acute sense of how you're not up to scratch, and so that leads naturally to a sort of self-contemptuous attitude. People are more likely to give prescription medication to their pets than to take them themselves. Imagine someone that you treat well, that you love, and try to treat yourself that way. You got to detach from yourself this. You got to think, okay, well, I'm a person among other people, and I deserve at least as much respect as a person among other people. I should be trying to help myself across time. Instead of being self-contemptuous and self-destructive, I need to take care of myself as if I'm potentially valuable and to lay out my life that way. It's hard for people. They don't take care of themselves as well as they should. Take care of your room, take care of your things, like have some respect for yourself as a miraculous being, because that is actually what you are. There's a lot of potential within you. You're necessary more than you think to the unfolding of things. Being an individual, it's the thing that Western civilization has always recognized, that as an individual, you have a light that you have to bring into the world, and that if you don't bring it into the world is a dimmer place, and that's a bad thing, because when the world is a dim place, it can be very, very, very dark.
Okay, we are back and she is still whining. Oh my goodness. So I want to share this. This link. It's very easy for us to have self-contempt. Samantha P says, I got it, survival. I just do my best to keep my host as healthy as possible. Being a parasite, going back to that. I think that if we're a parasite, we're a symbiotic parasite. Maybe she wants Mary Lou. Yeah, Mary Lou was over earlier and they got their walk and everything like that. No, she's just whining for attention at this point. But I want to share this link. It's to a short movie called Boat Lift. And it's about 9/11 and when all the tunnels and the bridges were shut down, and people realized that once again that Manhattan is in fact an island, and people were trying to evacuate, and the only way on or off the island was by boat. And so the idea, stop. You've had 2 treats now. The idea is that we never know when our moment to be a hero comes. And these were people that were just working on the water every day and didn't think too much about it. And then suddenly, when a catastrophe strikes, these people become the most important people in the world, saving other people's lives. And so, we may think that our life is, just small and just one cog in the machine and everything like that. But then this moment may strike where you are the person to save that drowning child. You just happen to be in the right place in the right time. And, everything before that may be monotonous and maybe just mundane as all get out. But then that one shining moment is so super important that we need to take care of ourselves to be ready for that moment, and we have no idea when it's going to come. We have no idea when it's going to strike. So until then, we have to take care of ourselves, and just take the basic, everyday sort of regimen that we need, eating the right foods, going to bed at the right time, all that good stuff, so that, we're able to be what we need to be in that moment. So I encourage you all to check that out. So it brings me to tears every time I watch it. So where were we? All right, we had just finished up with Nietzsche. He whose life has a why can bear almost any how. And that's true for people going through boot camp. They know why they're going through boot camp. So even though boot camp is nasty and, people have been marching on broken ankles and things like that, they work through the pain. They work because they have a goal in mind. They know why they're doing it. So how they do it, how they get through it, is of no consequence. It's the why. Why am I doing this? That's the most important. Why am I getting up in the morning and getting dressed and cleaning myself and all these, tasks that are just at times even frustrating, to do the dishes, make sure that they're clean, to do the laundry, to make sure that I have clean clothes to wear, all these monotonous just things that you'd rather not care about. Why am I doing all of this? If you know why, then the fact that you have to do it, the how of that, of having to do it doesn't matter anymore. So it becomes insignificant to the greater purpose. So you could help direct the world or its careening trajectory a bit more towards heaven and a bit away from hell. Once having understood hell, researched it, so to speak, particularly your own individual hell, you could decide against going there or creating that. You could aim elsewhere. You could, in fact, devote your life to this. That would give you a meaning with a capital M. And he actually says with a capital M at this point. That would justify your miserable existence. That would atone for your sinful nature and replace your shame and self-consciousness with the natural pride and forthright confidence of someone who has learned once again to walk with God in the garden. You could begin by treating yourself as if you were someone you were responsible for helping. All right, and we are at the end of the second rule, and now off to the third rule. Samantha P says, nice, that 3-minute break helped me double time catch up, only 2 minutes behind. That's wonderful, Samantha. It's all good. We're all just stumbling forward. It's okay. I fully forgive you and everyone else. We're just all trying to move towards a greater place of being, and we'll all get there. We'll all get there. It may be ungraceful as it is, but we'll get there, right? So, rule number 3 is make friends with people who want the best for you. And it starts out with this child. I don't know if this will show, but it's this child looking up at the statue of, who is that? David going up against Goliath. So you see that little kid down there and that giant shadow, which of course, has meaning in itself, looking up at that great hero who went up against the giant of Goliath and won. So we'll figure out why he chose that picture for this chapter. But to start it off, the old hometown. The town I grew up in had been scraped only 50 years earlier out of the endless flat of northern prairie. Fairview, Alberta, was part of the frontier and had the cowboy bars to prove it. The Hudson Bay Company department store on Main Street still bought beaver, wolf, and coyote furs directly from the local trappers. 3,000 people lived there, 400 miles away from the nearest city. Cable TV, video games, and internet did not exist. It was no easy matter to stay innocently amused in Fairview, particularly during the 5 months of winter, when long stretches of 40 below days and even colder nights were the norm. Oh, 40 below. I've been in that. You can't stay out in it long because your skin will literally freeze. You close your eyes and your eyelashes can freeze and you won't be able to open your eyes. That's miserable cold. The world is a different place when it's cold like that. The drunks in our town ended their lives early. They passed out in snowbanks at 3 a.m. and froze to death. You don't go outside casually when it's 40 below. On first breath, the arid desert air constricts your lungs. Ice forms on your eyelashes and they stick together. He even wrote about that. Long hair, wet from the shower, freezes solid and then stands on end, wraith-like of its own accord, later in a warm house when it thaws bone dry, charged with electricity. Children only put their tongues out on steel playground equipment once. Smoke from the house chimneys doesn't rise. Deflated by the cold, it drifts downward and collects like fog on the snow-covered rooftops and yards. Cars must be plugged in at night, their engines warmed by block heaters, or oil will not flow through them in the morning and they won't start. Sometimes they won't anyway. And you have to have special batteries. When I moved from Washington State to St. Louis, it was wintertime and my car wouldn't start. And I took it to the mechanic and he's like, yeah, you've got the wrong battery. It doesn't get cold like that in Washington State. And you need a battery that can handle the cold of St. Louis. So, yeah. Then you turn your engine over pointlessly until the starter clatters and falls silent. Then you remove the frozen battery from the car, loosening the bolts with stiffening fingers in the intense cold, and bring it into the house. It sits there, sweating for hours until it warms enough to hold a decent charge. Yep. You're not going to see out of the back window of your car either. It frosts over in November and stays that way until May. Scraping it off just dampens the upholstery. Then it's frozen too. Late one night, going to visit a friend, I sat for 2 hours on the end of the passenger seat in a 1970s Dodge Challenger, jammed up against the stick shift, using a vodka-soaked rag to help keep the inside of the front windshield clear in the front of the driver because the car heater had quit. Stopping wasn't an option. There was nowhere to stop. And it was hell on house cats. Felines in Fairview had short ears and tails because they lost the tips of both to frostbite. They came to resemble Arctic foxes, which evolved those features to deal proactively with the intense cold. One day our cat got out and no one noticed. We found him later, fur frozen fast to the cold, hard back door cement steps where he sat. We carefully separated the cat from concrete with no lasting damage except to his pride. Fairview cats were also at great risk in the winter from cars, but not for the reasons you think. It wasn't automobiles sliding on icy roads and running them over. Only loser cats died that way. It was cars parked immediately after being driven that were dangerous. A frigid cat may think highly of climbing under such a vehicle and sitting on its still warm engine block. But what if that driver decided to use the car again before the engine cooled down and the cat departed? Let's just say that heat-seeking house pets and rapidly rotating radiator fans do not coexist happily. Oh, poor kitties. Oh my gosh. Yeah, thinning the blood. Alcoholics, that happened even in the high desert in the Mojave. And you wouldn't think of the Mojave Desert being a place where that happened. But going out at night, because the temperature drops so rapidly in the wintertime, the drunks would just die of exposure. Survival says, my cousin passed outside drunk in severe cold weather and got frostbite on his feet and they had to be amputated. Yep. It's a wonder that he survived. He says he was a terrible drunk and refused help for years. Yeah. It's frustrating when you're trying to help somebody who refuses help. And there's not much to be done about it. And I know that, like every year, even in the summertime, because the temperature dropped from such high highs to such low lows, you get below 50 degrees and, you can die of exposure. So these people would, get drunk and try and walk home because they're not going to drive home. And they'd pass out on the side of the road or whatever and just never wake up because they got too cold. They didn't realize it. And they just die of exposure, even in the Mojave Desert. Alcoholism and cold do not mix well. So, because we were so far north, the bitterly cold winters were also very dark. By December, the sun didn't rise until 9:30 a.m. We trudged to school in the pitch black. It wasn't much lighter when we walked home just before early sunset. There wasn't much for young people to do in Fairview, even in the summer, but the winters were worse. Then your friends mattered more than anything. My friend Chris and his cousin. I had a friend at that time. We'll call him Chris. He was a smart guy. He read a lot. He liked science fiction of the kind I was attracted to. Bradbury, Heinlein, Clarke. It was inventive. He was interested in electronic kits and gears and motors. He was a natural engineer. All this was overshadowed, however, by something that had gone wrong in his family. I don't know what it was. His sisters were smart and his father was soft-spoken and his mother were kind. The girls seemed okay, but Chris had been left unattended to in some important way. Despite his intelligence and curiosity, he was angry, resentful, and without hope. All of this manifested in material form in the shape of his 1972 blue Ford pickup truck. The notorious vehicle had at least one dent in every quarter panel of its damaged external body. Worse, it had an equivalent number of dents inside. Those were produced by the impact of body parts of friends against the internal surfaces during the continual accidents that resulted in the outer dents. Chris's truck was the exoskeleton of a nihilist. It had the perfect bumper sticker. Be alert. The world needs more alerts. The irony it produced in combination with the dents elevated it nicely to a theater of the absurd. Very little of that was, so to speak, accidental. Every time Chris crashed his truck, his father would fix it and buy him something else. He had a motorbike and a van for selling ice cream. He did not care for his motorbike. He sold no ice cream. He often expressed dissatisfaction with his father and their relationship. But his dad was older and unwell, diagnosed with an illness only after many years. He didn't have the energy he should have. Maybe he couldn't pay enough attention to his son. Maybe that's all it took to fracture their relationship. Got alerted. Yeah. So Chris had a cousin, Ed, who was about 2 years younger. I liked him as much as you can like the younger cousin of a teenage friend. He was tall, smart, charming, good-looking kid. He was witty, too. You would have predicted a good fortune for him had you met him when he was 12. But Ed drifted slowly downhill into a dropout, semi-drifted mode of existence. He didn't get angry at Chris, but was just as confused. If you knew Ed's friends, you might say that it was peer pressure that set him on his downward path, but his peers weren't obviously any more lost or delinquent than he was, although they were generally somewhat less bright. It was also the case that Ed's and Chris's situation did not appear particularly improved by their discovery of marijuana. Marijuana isn't so bad for everyone any more than alcohol is bad for everyone. Sometimes it appears to improve people, but it didn't improve Ed. It didn't improve Chris either. To amuse ourselves in the long nights, Chris and I and Ed and the rest of the teenagers drove around and around in our 1970s cars and pickup trucks. We cruised down Main Street, along Railroad Avenue, up past the high school, around the north end of town, over to the west, or up Main Street, around the north end of town, and over to the east, and so on, endlessly repeating the theme. If we weren't driving in town, we were driving in the countryside. A century earlier, surveyors had laid out a vast grid across the entire 300,000 square mile expanse of the Great Western Prairie. Every 2 miles north, a plowed gravel road stretched forever east to west. Every mile west, another traveled north to south. We never ran out of roads. Get alerted and don't panic. I like that. So, teenage wasteland. If we weren't circling around town and countryside, we were at a party. Some relatively young adult or some relatively creepy older adult would open his house to friends. It would then become a temporary home to all manner of party crashers, many of whom started out seriously undesirable or quickly became that way when drinking. A party might also happen accidentally when some teenager's unwitting parents had left town. In that case, the occupants of the cars or trucks always cruising around would notice the house lights on, but the household car absent. This was not good. Things could get seriously out of hand. I did not like teenage parties. I do not remember them nostalgically. They were dismal affairs. The lights were kept low. That kept self-consciousness to a minimum. The overloud music made conversation impossible. There was little to talk about in any case. There was always a couple of the town of psychopaths attending. Everybody drank and smoked too much. A dreary and oppressive sense of aimlessness hung over such occasions, and nothing ever happened, unless you count the time my too quiet classmate drunkenly began to brandish his fully loaded 12-gauge shotgun, or the time the girl I later married contemptuously insulted someone while he threatened her with a knife, or the time another friend climbed a large tree, swung out on a branch, and crashed flat onto his back, half dead, right beside the campfire we had started at its base, followed precisely 1 minute later by his half-wit sidekick. This is what I remember, with my teenage parties. Survival says, damn, this is exactly what we did in high school in the 90s. Yeah, exactly. And this is what I remember at high school in the 80s. He says, it sounds like my life when I was a kid. We partied hard as F. Exactly. Teenage parties are a dismal affair. I mean, I remember I was never invited to the high school parties, so I actually always partied with a much older crowd. I was going to parties with people in their 20s and stuff like that, because my high school, I was kind of the outcast there. And so finally I crashed one of these parties and everybody was just standing around bored. And I knew all these drinking games, like one up, one down, and just this, that, and the other. And so I was drinking with, I was 15 and drinking with people who were, in their 20s. So Shell said, we used to have a smoking section outside in high school. Yeah, we had a student smoking section, and the teachers used to be able to smoke indoors. And then I remember when they banned smoking indoors, and then all the teachers had to come to the kids section smoking outdoors. And then they banned smoking on school grounds. So we just had to walk across the parking lot, to the other side, and we would smoke there. And that was the smoking section for school. But because I had been drinking with all these older people and they knew all these drinking games like quarters and everything else like that, I crashed this party and everybody was bored and didn't know what to do. And I was like, oh, let me show you this drinking game. And, so I played this drinking game, and I got everybody at the party, just drunk. And because I'd been drinking with much older people, they're drinking beer, I was used to drinking shots. I drank them all under the table. And the next day, I could not believe this. I could not believe this. The next day, I was the most popular person at school because I had been the life of the party. I knew all the games. I knew, all this other stuff. And I was shocked. I was like, that's all it takes to be the most popular kid at school, is to know how to drink and play drinking games. I mean, that's just insane to me. But everybody wanted me at their party after that. And I was just completely disgusted by the whole thing. So Shell says, I told my daughter I was going to live in a van down by a river. She replied, haha, yeah, right. She knows me too well. I wouldn't last. Yeah, right. The comforts of home do mean a lot. I've lived in a proverbial van down the river, and it's no. I like having a shower. You know what I mean? So, no one knew what the hell they were doing at those parties. Exactly. Hoping for a cheerleader, waiting for Godot, although the former would have been immediately preferred, although cheerleading squads were scarce in our town, the latter was closer to the truth. It would be more romantic, I suppose, to suggest that we all would have jumped at the chance for something more productive, bored out of our skulls as we were, but it was not true. We were all too prematurely cynical and world-weary and leery of responsibility to stick to the debating club and the air cadets and school sports that the adults around us tried to organize. Doing anything wasn't cool. I don't know what teenage life was like before the revolutionaries of the late 60s advised everyone young to tune in, turn on, and drop out. Was it okay for a teenager to belong wholeheartedly to a club in 1955? Because certainly it wasn't 20 years later. Plenty of us turned on and dropped out, but not so many tuned in. It sounded good for a minute. Yeah, it is good for about a minute, and then you realize. So the WYSIWYG guy is doing pretty good at it. Yeah. He has a home also, though. Yeah, that's the big thing. So yeah, it's good in show. It's not good in practice. Um, I wanted to be elsewhere. I wasn't the only one. Everyone who eventually left Fairview, the Fairview I grew up in, knew they were leaving by the age of 12. I knew. My wife, who grew up with me on the street our family shared, knew. The friends I had who didn't and who the friends I had who did and didn't leave also knew, regardless of which track they were on. There was an unspoken expectation in the families of those who were college bound that such a thing was a matter of course. For those from less educated families, a future that included university was simply not part of the conceptual realm. It wasn't for lack of money either. Tuition for advanced education was very low at that time, and jobs in Alberta were plentiful and high paying. I earned more money in 1980 working a plywood mill than I would again doing anything else for 20 years. No one missed out on university because of financial need in the oil-rich Alberta in the 1970s. Some different friends and some more of the same. In high school, after my first group of cronies had all dropped out, I made friends with a couple of newcomers. They came to Fairview as boarders. There was no school after ninth grade, even in their more remote and aptly named hometown, Bear Canyon. They were an ambitious duo, comparatively speaking, straightforward and reliable, but also cool and very amusing. When I left town to attend Grand Prairie Regional College, 90 miles away, one of them became my roommate. The other went off elsewhere to pursue further education. Both were aiming upward. Their decisions to do so bolstered mine. I was a happy clam when I arrived at college. I found another expanded group of like-minded companions, whom my Bear Canyon comrade also joined. We were all captivated by literature and philosophy. We ran the student union. We made it profitable for the first time in history, hosting college dances. How can you lose money selling beer to college kids? We started a newspaper. We got to know our professors of political science and biology and English literature in the tiny seminars that characterized even our first year. The instructors were thankful for the enthusiasm and taught us well. We were building a better life. I sloughed off a lot of my past. In a small town, everyone knows who you are. You drag your years behind you like a running dog with tin cans tied to its tail. You can't escape where you've been. Everything wasn't online then, and thank God for that, but it was stored equally indelibly in everyone's spoken and unspoken expectations and memory. Oh, I know about that. That's why I was so happy to leave St. Louis, because everyone knew everyone, and you couldn't escape it. They would ask you what high school you would go to, and depending on what your zip code was, they would know everything about you. They would know, probably what your parents did as a profession. They would know what you were into. They would know just everything. What high school did you go to? Oh, you went to Ladue. Okay, so your parents are the snobby types, and it just you would know everything by where did you go to high school, and what a silly question to ask somebody, but that was the St. Louis thing. So yeah, small towns are hard. When you move, everything up is up in the air, at least for a little while. It's stressful, but in the chaos, there are new possibilities. People, including you, can't hem you in with their old notions. You get shaken out of your ruts. You can make new, better ruts with people aiming at better things. I thought this was just a natural development. I thought that every person who moved would have and want the same Phoenix-like experience. But this wasn't always the case. One time when I was about 15, I went with Chris and another friend, Carl, to Edmonton, a city of 600,000. Carl had never been to a city. This was not uncommon. Fairview to Edmonton was an 800-mile round trip. I had done it many times, sometimes with my parents, sometimes without. I liked the anonymity that the city provided. I liked the new beginnings. I liked the escape from the dismal, cramped adolescent culture of my hometown. So I convinced my two friends to make the journey, but they did not have the same experience. As soon as we arrived, Chris and Carl wanted to buy some pot. We headed for the parts of Edmonton that were exactly like the worst of Fairview. We found the same furtive street vending marijuana providers. We spent the weekend drinking in the hotel room. Although we had traveled a long distance, we had gone nowhere at all. I saw an even more egregious example of this a few years later. I had moved to Edmonton to finish my undergraduate degree. I took an apartment with my sister, who was studying to be a nurse. She also had an up and out of there person. Not too many years later, she would plant strawberries in Norway and run safaris through Africa and smuggle trucks across the Tuguri menaced Sahara Desert and babysit orphan gorillas in the Congo. Whoa, that's a hell of a life. We had a nice place in the new high-rise overlooking the broad valley of the North Saskatchewan River. We had a view of the city skyline in the background. I bought a beautiful new Yamaha upright piano in a fit of enthusiasm. The place looked good. I heard through the grapevine that Ed, Chris's younger cousin, had moved to the city. I thought this was a good thing. One day he called. I invited him over. I wanted to see how he was faring. I hoped that he was achieving some of the potential I once saw in him. This is not what happened. Ed showed up, older, balder, and stooped. He was a lot more not doing so well young adult and had a lot less useful possibility. His eyes were the telltale red slits of the practiced stoner. Ed had taken some job, lawn mowing and casual landscaping, which would have been fine for a part-time university student or for someone who could not do better but was wretchedly low-end as a career for an intelligent person. He was accompanied by a friend. It was his friend that I really remember. He was spaced. He was baked. He was stoned out of his gourd. His head and our nice, civilized apartment did not easily occupy the same universe. My sister was there. She knew Ed. She'd seen this sort of thing before, but I still wasn't happy that Ed had brought this character into our place. Ed sat down. His friend sat down too, although it wasn't clear that he noticed. It was a tragicomedy. Stoned as he was, Ed still had the sense to be embarrassed. We sipped our beer. Ed's friend looked upwards. My particles are scattered all over the ceiling, he managed. Truer words were never spoken. I took Ed aside and told him politely that he had to leave. I said that he shouldn't have brought his useless bastard of a companion. He nodded. He understood. That made it even worse. His older cousin Chris wrote me a letter much later about such things. I included it in my first book, Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, published in 1999. I had friends, he said, before. Anyone with enough self-contempt that they could forgive me mine. It was that made Chris and Carl and Ed unable, or worse, perhaps unwilling, to move or to challenge their friendship and improve their circumstances of their lives. Was it inevitable? A consequence of their own limitation, nascent illnesses and traumas of the past. After all, people vary significantly in ways that seem both structural and deterministic. People differ in intelligence, which is a large part in the ability to learn to transform. People have a very different personalities as well. Some are active, some are passive. Others are anxious or calm. For every individual driven to achieve, there is another who is indolent. The degrees to which these differences are immutably part and parcel of someone is greater than an optimist might presume, or desire. And then there is illness, mental and physical, diagnosed or invisible, further limiting or shaping our lives. Chris had a psychotic break in his 30s after flirting with insanity for many years. Not long afterwards, he committed suicide. Did his heavy marijuana use play in a magnifying role, or was it understandable self-medication? Use of physician prescribed drugs for pain has, after all, decreased in marijuana legal states such as Colorado. Maybe the pot made things better for Chris, not worse. Maybe it eased his suffering instead of exacerbating his instability. Was it the nihilistic philosophy he nurtured that paved his way to his eventual breakdown? Was that nihilism in turn a consequence of his genuine ill health, or just an intellectual rationalization of his unwillingness to divide responsibility into life? Why did he, like his cousin, like my other friends, continually choose people who and places that were not good for them? Sometimes when people have a low opinion of their worth, or perhaps when they refuse responsibility for their lives, they choose a new acquaintance of precisely the type who proved troublesome in the past. Some people don't believe that they deserved any better, so they don't go looking for it. Or perhaps they don't want the trouble of better. Freud called this a repetition compulsion. He thought of it as an unconscious drive to repeat the horrors of the past, sometimes perhaps to formulate those horrors more precisely, sometimes to attempt more active mastery, and sometimes perhaps because no alternatives beckon. Now, I can say something to this. A lot of times we choose the same traumas, the same people who would enact the same traumas, because there's a two-part to this. One, it's familiar. It's the dysfunction that we grew up with, the dysfunction that we were around as teenagers. It's familiar. Those people are familiar. They seem like, we've been friends forever sort of thing. And it's because they have the same attitudes, the same patterns of behavior that make us say, oh, I recognize that. And so we're drawn to it because it's comfortable, like an old pair of shoes. But then also a lot of the times when it comes to trauma, we're trying to work things out. We're trying to solve the problems of the past in a new way. And so we seek those situations out because we're trying to figure out a new way of being. What went wrong last time? What can I fix this time? So instead of choosing an entirely new situation, we choose an old situation that we might be trying to remedy, that we might be trying to fix, that sort of thing. And the brain is geared towards that, where we will repeat traumatic situations because we're trying to find a new direction out this way. So I'm going to go to the chat here. Oh, the South has its own thing. So people are talking about the different towns that they grew up in. Survival. The town I grew up in was a smallish town. The next town over was Smug Olympia. And they called us the inbred rednecks. Oh, yeah. No, the Pacific Northwest is very, very amusing in that way. I wouldn't consider Olympia to be that sophisticated, but of course they would. But Olympia compared to somewhere like Seattle, of course, Seattle looks down on Olympia. So the whole thing is just chaos and amusing. I'm an outsider to the Pacific Northwest, so it's amusing to me in that way. My mother spent some time in Spanaway, back when Spanaway was very different. Yeah, there's always that goes on, that, these guys are the inbred ones, and they're looked down upon by these guys, but then these guys are actually considered the inbred ones compared to these guys over here. And it's just, it's people. It's people. So, oh yeah. Survival's in Tacoma now, and it's a hella diverse, and we all get along great. Yes, yes. Although there is the Tacoma aroma. Does that still exist, Survival? Shell says, it's always fun time at our local bar and everybody gets along and has a blast. That's awesome. And then Taylor says, in Alabama, it's very diverse and we get along despite what the South has as a stereotype. Yeah. My mom grew up in the South. So Shaman says, I bet those cats in Peterson were jamming hell of a lot of classic heavy rock too. Yeah. I can only imagine. The 70s were, I was just a kid in the 70s. So, he's old enough to me to be my father. So, or maybe he's a little bit younger than my father, I would think. So, but yeah, Skinnerd. Survival. Do I look inbred? And smug leftists. Yep. It always happens. Oki says, I didn't know what a black guy or a Mexican kid was until the teacher told me my friends were different. Dad didn't teach me the difference between the races until school brought it up. That's interesting. No Tacoma aroma anymore. Oh my gosh. They used to have, for people who don't know, they used to have the wood processing plants in Tacoma right along the river that goes into the Puget Sound. And it smelled like rotting beets. And so that was the Tacoma aroma. And as you were driving around down I-5 heading south, if you were going to Portland or something like that, there was, you always knew that you were arriving near Tacoma because of the aroma that would waft into the car. And there was no way to block that out. I mean, you could put the car on, recycled air and everything like that. It's still the smell of rotting beets got into the car. So it's funny that that's gone. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The Tacoma aroma. That was such a thing. So it's funny to know that that's gone. But anyway, we are about 7 minutes towards the end. Let me see how much more I have to read here. I think it's just a passage and we can maybe get through it before the next section I can talk. So let's try. Sometimes when people have a low opinion of their own worth, or perhaps when they refuse to take responsibility for their lives, they choose a new acquaintance of precisely the type who proved troublesome in the past. Some people don't believe that they deserve any better, or they don't go looking for it. Or perhaps they don't want the trouble of better. Oh, we went through this before. The repetition compulsion from Freud. He thought that it is an unconscious drive to repeat the horrors of the past, sometimes perhaps to formulate those horrors more precisely, sometimes to attempt more active mastery. Yes, this is true. More active mastery. And because no alternatives beckon, people create their worlds with the tools that they have directly at hand. Faulty tools produce faulty results. Repeated use of the same faulty tools produces the same faulty results. It is in this manner that people who fail to learn from the past doom themselves to repeat it. It's partly fate, it's partly inability, it's partly unwillingness to learn, refusal to learn, motivated refusal to learn. And he ends that section with the question mark. So now we're on to the next section, recusing the damned. And yes, Gary is live in 6 minutes now. So Nana says, gotta feed the pups. Thank you, Pam. You're very welcome, Nana. You go feed the pups. We will just everybody, let's head over to Gary Lamb's live after this. So but yeah, we can wrap it up with a little bit of chat in the last 5 minutes. And I will, bye, Nana. I will see you all on Gary's live. Although I may actually, my pups are finally asleep. After all that annoying behavior they did an hour ago, they're finally asleep. So, but yeah, this is an interesting chapter. It's the chapter of make friends with people who want the best for you. You're very welcome, Survival. You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody, for hanging around. And make friends with people who want the best for you. And those friends are often hard to find. And next week, I'll open up with the song by Akira the Dawn on this. And again, remember, it's on Thursday next week, not Friday. So, it's should be a good time. And I had a lovely time with you all tonight. We got through Rule 2. We're on to Rule 3. Good. Survival says tomorrow I'm going to have a live stream with my friend from the Netherlands. It should be interesting. I look forward to that. What time is that, Survival? Tell us what time that is. So, Okie asks, did he cover what to do if you were the one dragging people down? No, he did not cover that. So I'm not sure. I guess just get your act together. That's the big thing. So Shell says, love you, Pam. I love you too, Shell. I love all of you, the Pam fam. So Listening Mantis says, thank you, Pam. Yes, Pam fam, Taylor, the Pam fam. So it's 12 p.m. This is Survival's live tomorrow with his friend from the Netherlands. It's 12 p.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Mountain time, 2 p.m. Central time, and 3 Eastern time. So everybody be sure to catch that tomorrow afternoon. That'll be interesting. Somebody from the Netherlands. I'd like to get their input on all of this. What are you guys going to talk about? That sounds like a lot of fun. So Survival says, the Pam fam. Yep, we are the Pam fam. Shaman says, great show again, Pam. Thank you. And your commentary is always relevant and on point too. I'm glad I could add that to it. Yeah. I hope I mean, the questions that I have and the understanding that I have, I hope, adds to it a little bit. So, I wonder what that is in Netherlands time. That's interesting. What time at night? Because it's got to be nighttime for them over there. But that'll be really cool. That'll be really cool. How did you get a friend from the Netherlands? You'll have to tell us that. So that is just awesome. But we have 2 minutes left. 2 minutes to just hang out and chat. So it's interesting hearing about Jordan Peterson's upbringing. I mean, I know that I when I was in Seattle, I met a lot of people who had moved south from Alaska, and it's really hard growing up there. It's really hard being an adult there. So growing up there, I think, would be even worse. So Survival says Netherlands time will be 9 p.m. They're having lockdown riots. Oh my goodness. And you're just going to have fun? That sounds like a blast. So, but, did we get to the part about buying a coffee maker? No, not yet. So that should be later. Shell, you should not spread such, oh my gosh, you just, what is it, libel? Or is it slander? It's libel since it's written, right? But so it is 7:00. Let's all head over to Gary Lamb's Live. I will see you all there, and thank you all for being here. Good night. Love you all.